All right, welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we are talking about the Baltimore Ravens, and I am joined by Cordell Woodland, host of Shakin It Up Sports on 105.7 The Fan in Baltimore. How are you doing?
What's going on, man? How's it going?
Hey, any day I can talk about football is a good day. I always say that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're getting closer and closer to football being back. Football is back for some people. We're in that
Mhm.
time right now, so it's all smiles for me.
Yeah, and NFL offseason has, there's always something to talk about. And, especially, with the Ravens now, I mean, there's a lot that's going on right now. Um, so let's just kind of right out of the gate, we'll kind of get into it. What are you hearing about the Lamar Jackson contract situation, the latest, and what are your kind of thoughts on that?
Well, we finally got to talk to Lamar yesterday, and the mantra, I guess you could say, leaving that press conference is they're having conversations. That was something that Lamar said about 20 times yesterday. So if nothing else, they are having conversations right now, and we're joking, but at the same time, it's a good thing because coming into this year, we didn't know how many conversations that they were having. Lamar has been reluctant to negotiate anything regarding an extension. He's been reluctant to talk to the media about anything regarding his extension. So to hear him say that they have talked since he's been back in town is a step in the right direction for sure.
And when you look at it, this has really been a pretty smart move on his part, hasn't it, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, he holds all the cards, and at the end of the day, the Ravens need Lamar Jackson. I can tell you from
Mhm.
somebody who's been out there since OTAs this year. Lamar, as everybody knows, he missed OTAs, and they're out there with Tyler Huntley, who's a pretty decent quarterback. He played well, having to back up Lamar last year, but they also have Brett Hundley and Anthony Brown, a quarterback from Oregon. So with Lamar not being there, you could see quickly they needed Lamar Jackson. And if I can see it, I know the people that are, in charge of giving him the money, they can see it because they've been out there. The GM, Eric DeCosta, he's been out there every day. So looking at that group compared to now, once Lamar shows up to minicamp, it was a totally different vibe. Um, Everybody knows what Lamar brings to this team. He's the face of this franchise. He's the leader in this offense. This offense is only going to go as far as Lamar Jackson takes them. So it's good to have him there. And Lamar holds all the keys. And the only thing I do wish is that Lamar kind of took the narrative by the horns. I feel like he, even yesterday, the whole we're having conversations, that's kind of a PR thing. They huddled up a little bit before Lamar came to address the media. So they kind of went over their game plan a little bit, which is typical. But if I'm Lamar, I at some point want to take control of this narrative. The Ravens have pretty much dictated everything that's put out to the media to this point. They're the ones that's putting out this Lamar doesn't feel like he's worthy of a contract until he wins a Super Bowl. And Lamar was asked about that yesterday, and he's like, well, I do think I'm worthy. So it's good. I think it's important for Lamar to start getting out in front of some of this stuff and start saying how he feels so we don't have to guess.
Do you think the trade of Marquise Brown had any effect on this process?
I think it'd be a little naive to not to think it didn't. Right, Lamar and Marquise Brown, they've been tied at the hip since they both got to Baltimore. It's well documented that Marquise Brown is Lamar's best friend on the team. They rode to games together. They rode back home together, and when you lose somebody that that's a friend to you, that close of a friend to you off the field, as well as has been one of his best targets on the field, it has an impact. And Marquise Brown he said that he had been asking for a trade the last 2 years. So considering Lamar's his right hand man, Lamar had to know that, number one. And if Marquise is complaining about Greg Roman's offense, who do you think he's complaining to? He's complaining to Lamar Jackson in the car on the ride to the state. Maybe not even on the ride there, but think about it after a loss when Marquise doesn't have the game he wants to have. The first person he's going to complain to is Lamar Jackson. So, I think it definitely has an impact on Lamar because we can sit here and say that this whole stigma that the Ravens, that the receivers don't want to play for the Ravens because they don't want to block, it has some sort of basis to it. We just saw it with Marquise Brown. he felt like Greg Roman's offense doesn't fit for him. That's a common thing around the league. We all know Mark Andrews is the guy in this passing offense. I think Rashod Bateman is going to be really good. But just all in all, since Lamar's been here, the receivers have never been a focal point in the pass game. And I don't think that's going to change, at least while Greg Roman's here.
So do you think that, I mean, have you heard Lamar complain about Greg Roman at all then, or?
I mean, you hear whispers here and there, depending on who you talk to. Some people, depending on who you talk to, may say that Lamar feels like Greg Roman's lack of a passing scheme does hinder him as a passer. A lot of people like to talk about Lamar needing to step up his passing game. Lamar may feel like that the passing scheme that the Ravens run isn't beneficial to him. Is not getting guys open. Is not getting, giving the receivers easy reads out there when they're looking at the coverages and things of that nature. So I think it's a little bit of that there. But at the same time, Lamar's a unanimous MVP under a Greg Roman ran offense. So how much does he, not like it is the question. I don't know. But every time you ask him, he's got nothing but good things to say about Greg Roman. And at the end of the day, I think Greg Roman has done a fairly decent job at putting this offensive scheme together towards Lamar's strengths. But I also believe that Greg Roman has his deficiencies in the passing game has hurt the Ravens. And while the Ravens have a good offensive scheme to get them through the regular season, come playoff time when teams are loading up the box and you're not able to get 5 to 6 yards of carry and you have to throw the ball, that could be the Ravens' downfall.
Do you think that Lamar would like maybe more collaboration with Greg Roman on that, and maybe that would help him, maybe want to get a deal done?
I don't know if that'll help get the deal done necessarily, but I'm pretty sure Greg Roman does engage with Lamar and what he likes, what he doesn't like, because at the end of the day, this offense is for Lamar. So I do think that Lamar is constantly in Greg Roman's ear. I do think that all the coaches respect what Lamar has to say and what his thoughts are. But at the end of the day, I think when it comes to the contract situation, I think it's a little bit bigger than Roman, so to speak. And I think this is a make or break year for Greg Roman in himself. But so many factors are going into this Lamar contract situation. It's just hard to pinpoint one thing as being the main factor.
Do you think my guy Ronnie Eastham here has a question? Do you think that he would hold out if a deal isn't done?
I'll be very surprised. I know yesterday it became a topic of Lamar was asked would he show up to training camp under his current deal, or if he would even go as far as to miss week 1 without a long-term extension. And Lamar kind of brushed it off. And said, I don't know. And that's the thing that everybody's kind of sticking to that's got people a little scared. Me personally, being there and, standing in front of Lamar's face, I think that was more of a situation of Lamar trying to not give the media anything. And I think he just got caught up in saying, I don't know. And that's just what it is. When people are going to start taking every word you say, they're going to look at it critically. And I think more so his I don't know was just him playing the game. He's his own agent. He's got to keep the team on their toes. Like I said, they saw what they have in that quarterback room during OTAs when Lamar wasn't there. So Lamar's got to let them know, like, hey, yeah, I'm here today, but I could, just decide to just not show up. But at the end of the day, I don't see that happening. Lamar and his receivers are going down to work out at FAU for the next 4 to 5 weeks. He's been in the weight room. He's been working out. He's not doing all this to sit on the couch. He keeps talking about winning a Super Bowl. You can't win a Super Bowl from home.
Exactly. And so full disclosure, I am a Bears fan.
Okay.
And I am living in Wisconsin. So it's been interesting. And you look at, you talk about,
that's a tough place to be as a Bears fan, I'm sure.
At this time, the last couple of years, it has been.
Yeah.
But so you look at, you compare Lamar Jackson to, you say he's going to be working out with his receivers.
Mm-hmm.
That's something amid this contract, situation that he's doing. You look at Aaron Rodgers, and I'm the first one to say, Aaron Rodgers, I don't know, he's more of a diva. Like he is not, working out with his receivers. And, obviously the Packer fans here are saying, Packers are going to be fine without Devontae Adams, but they're not. It takes some time to kind of get used to the receivers, and Aaron Rodgers takes that time to do that. So when you look at Lamar, he's focused on, it sounds like, really trying to gel with his receivers. I mean, do you see him kind of maybe having a little bit more of that, drive to succeed, in the playoffs, coming this year then because of, what he's gone through?
Oh yeah, I mean, and he was asked about that yesterday, and he went as far as to say he feels better now than he did going into the 2019 season, which is the season he won MVP. He talked about how motivated he is. Look, Lamar sees all the stuff that's going on. He sees all the things that people are saying about him. He sees what's going on all around there. And you brought up Aaron Rodgers. I thought that was a unique situation. As you know, he didn't show up to OTAs either. And he's out there with, like you mentioned, no Devontae Adams. It's not going to be as simple as the pitch and catch that he's been playing the last few years. Just throw it down there because I know 17 is there and I know how to put it right on him. Their offense is going to have to be a little bit more spread out this year. So it was kind of alarming that nobody really cared anything about Aaron Rodgers missing camp, considering he's got a new receiving core. But Lamar, granted, Marquise Brown isn't here, but all these guys Lamar's played with before. And Lamar talked about how he brought it to his receivers, his guys, about the thought that he may not show up to OTAs, and he said that they were fine with it. They know he's working, and at the end of the day, as long as the guys he's going to be on the field with are okay with it, that's all that matters.
Well, speaking of the guys that are there, Rashod Bateman, talk about him a little bit. In do you see him having a breakout year this year?
No question. I think Rashod Bateman is definitely in line for a breakout year. I thought he was he could have had one last year, but as you know, he came into the year hurt, had to miss a lot of camp. He missed, I think, the first 5 or 6 games of last year. And then by the time he gets there, he's playing catch up, and then Lamar gets hurt and he's got to play with a backup quarterback. It was just such a weird year for the Ravens last year. But coming into this year, no question, I thought that Rashod Bateman would be one of the guys in line for a breakout year. And that's with or without Marquise Brown being in that locker room. I thought Rashod Bateman was going to be the best wide receiver on this team this year, whether Marquise Brown was there or not. And I think it's a lot of things about Rashod Bateman's game that wasn't exposed last year. So that'll be good because it's not a lot of his thing, a lot of the good things that I think he can do. They weren't put on film last year. I think he's a deep threat, a guy that we're going to see them emphasize the deep ball a lot more this year. We saw it when he was at Minnesota in college. He's a guy that can win the jump ball, the 50-50 balls down the field. So I expect to see a lot of that this year. He's gotten a little bit more bigger. You see him out there. He has the demeanor of a guy that knows he's the new number one receiver. And like I said, let's not get it twisted. While he's the number one receiver, Mark Andrews is the number one target in this passing game. That's always going to be the case. This passing game feeds the tight ends. But Rashod Bateman is definitely going to be a guy to watch this year for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so if he comes out of the gate and just, is lighting it on fire and defenses, start to kind of adjust to that, what other receivers do you see kind of, having a bigger impact in the offense as well?
Well, I think it'll be good for him that he won't have to be the focal point guy. Mark Andrews is going to get, after coming off his all-pro year last year, I anticipate Mark Andrews seeing a lot of double teams this year. So I think that will open up things for Rashod Bateman. And also the Ravens brought in 2 other rookie tight ends this year, Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kohler. I think those guys, especially Isaiah Likely, I think he's going to be a guy that lines up all over the field. Their personnel packages are going to be a little crazy this year. Another guy I would look to watch out for is James Prochet, slot receiver. I've been wanting James Prochet to get more play time since he's been drafted, and it just seems like the Ravens will find any reason to not put him on the field. But this year, considering their wide receiver depth, he's going to have to play, and I think he's going to be a guy to watch. I think he's a very good route runner. He gets open in the short to intermediate routes. I think he'll be a good safety net for Lamar. And lastly, rookie running back Tyler Beatty, the running back that the Ravens drafted from Missouri in the 6th round this year. I believe he was all SEC. He's a stud. I think he's going to be a guy that gives them something in the passing game And the Ravens haven't had a running back to give them anything in the passing game since maybe Ray Rice. So it'll be good to see Tyler Beatty out there, because I think he makes this offense a little bit more dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, I mean, the running backs. It's kind of been, it, it was really too bad. What happened. Running back after running back. And when you look
Mm-hmm.
at that, I mean, what are you hearing the kind of the health of the Ravens running back J.K. Dobbins and maybe the roles kind of going into it? You said obviously Tyler Beatty, will factor in. What about the rest of the crew there?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, they're two workhorses. They're coming back off major injuries from last year. And John Harbaugh talked a little bit about them yesterday as well. Leaving that, and even before that, I'm a little bit more optimistic about J.K.'s health than I am about Gus Edwards' health. I think J.K., it sounds like he'll be able to contribute something in training camp. I don't know if he'll be able to be there at the start of training camp. We'll see. But I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Gus Edwards starts training camp on the PUP list. I just get the sense that they're not 100% certain about where he is today, and they just want to be sure with these guys. So considering that, they did bring in Mike Davis, running back who was in Atlanta last year. I don't know if Mike Davis will. I think Mike Davis making this team depends on the health of specifically Gus Edwards, because I think that the Ravens keep 4 running backs this year. So if everybody's healthy, I think the 4 running backs will be J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Tyler Beatty, and Justice Hill. Justice Hill, because he gives them something on the special team side, and John Harbaugh loves his special teams guys. Now, if Gus Edwards ends up having to start the season on the PUP list, then we can have a situation where Mike Davis does slide into that spot, because they're going to need that bruiser. They're going to need a guy that's going to be able to, be that thumper, so to speak, out of their running back group. And I think Mike Davis would be able to fit that role. So they do have a ton of depth, but their injury question marks are still there.
Yeah, I mean, so like fantasy football wise, you almost want to stay away from.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I would stay away from these guys in the early round. I mean, if you can get them later on as a steal, sure. J.K. Dobbins would definitely be a steal, I would imagine, because he was in line for a breakout year last year. Had he been able to stay healthy, it would have been his first year as the main guy. But right now, you really just can't trust any of the guys right now on this roster, because we don't know who's going to be healthy just yet.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Tyler Beatty. I mean, you talked about him, and that it might be a good opportunity for him, for people either in Dynasty to pick him up as well. Then,
Oh yeah, no question. I think he'll be a guy, especially earlier in the season. He's a guy to watch for on the waiver wire, depending on how deep of the leagues that you're in. I would look at him later on in the draft, depending on what the running back situation is looking like. But I definitely believe he's going to be a guy that contributes in the passing game. When I look at this running back group, even if they're all healthy, I see Tyler Beatty as the third down back. He's the only one that gives them something in the passing game as a receiver. And I've seen him do pretty well in pass pro as well, which we know is a big role for any third down back. And he's a guy that can run in between the tackles. He's very versatile. So I really think he's going to be a dark horse contributor for this team, because he gives them something none of the other guys do.
now, speaking of some of the new additions as well, obviously the Ravens had a lot of draft picks. Who do you see, really contributing to this team this year from that group?
Well, I think a couple of these guys are going to contribute right away. I mean, one of the big things from Eric DeCosta going into the draft was they wanted to draft guys that were going to be instant impact guys. And for the most part, that's what the Ravens did. I mean, you look at their draft, Kyle Hamilton, their first round pick, he's a stud. Kyle Hamilton is a complete stud. I think that this dude is going to be dominant this year. And just the fact that the Ravens are going to move him around all over the field. He can do so many different things. And the Ravens do kind of have a hole at the linebacking core, especially in the middle linebacking group. So I expect them to have a lot of safeties on the field at times. We could see 6 to 7 DBs on the field at times for the Ravens this year. And I think that they're going to also use guys like Kyle Hamilton to kind of make up for their lack of a pass rush. Pass rush is a huge issue right now in Baltimore, injury-wise. and also just because it's still a question mark, even if the guys there are healthy. So Kyle Hamilton, I think he's going to be a stud this year. Tyler Linderbaum, he's their starting center. He's going to be the starting center day one. That was their second first-round pick. David Ajabo, I mean, had he not gotten hurt, he'd have been a top 10 pick, you know? So in typical Ravens fashion, he falls right to him in the second round, and it works out for them. So they have more optimism that he'll be able to play this year. We'll see. I don't know how much he'll be able to give them right out the gate, but I think he's going to be a contributor. I think most of these guys are all going to be contributors. I talked about the tight ends. I think both of the tight ends are going to give them something. Isaiah Likely more so because he has the flexibility to line up in the slot, and I think he gives them some downfield action as well in the passing game, especially in the middle of the field. When you look at that 2019 Ravens offense, a big part of that was their tight ends and them going out there with 2 to 3 tight end sets a lot. And I think we could see the return of that this year.
Is this, one of the best drafts that the Ravens have had?
Definitely within recent memory. Definitely for Eric DeCosta. And he's caught a lot of flack, I guess you could say, the last few years over his drafts. A lot of his draft picks haven't come to fruition right now. He's drafted quite a few projects for sure. But this year, I would say that this was definitely maybe his best draft since he's taken over from Ozzie Newsome. The great Ozzie Newsome, since he's taken over for him. I think Eric, I call this the value draft for the Ravens. They got nothing but great value from all of their picks. Kyle Hamilton is thought to be the best safety in the draft. He fell all the way to 12, I believe is when the Ravens picked this year, or 11. That wasn't really something that a lot of people thought. Tyler Linderbaum, people call him the best center in the class. David Ajabo, had he been healthy, he'd have been a top 10 pick. So they definitely grabbed a lot of quality guys, and even all the way down to Jordan Stout, their punter, who started to be the best punter in the draft. The Ravens just really did a great job of getting the best bang for their buck possibly. And I think all of these guys, with the exception of maybe Daniel Falele, because it just looks like it'll be in a little adjustment for him right now. With the exception of him, I think all of these guys that they drafted this year are going to make a contribution this year.
Well, I'm an Iowa guy, and I definitely love the Tyler Linderbaum pick. I mean, in the Ravens have done well in the past with an Iowa lineman, so
Yep.
it's definitely something that can help in that running game as well.
Oh, no question. And Tyler Linderbaum, a lot was said about his quote unquote lack of size. His small arms or something like that. He looks good to me. And Lamar talked a little bit about him yesterday about just how fast Tyler Linderbaum is. He's a quick guy. I think the dude is a stud. He's got a wrestling background. He knows how to use his size to his advantage. He knows the importance of leverage. And you talked about it. He's an Iowa guy. We know the type of lineman that Iowa breeds. Marshall Yonder, he's a future Hall of Famer here in Baltimore. Tyler Linderbaum looks to fit that mold. I think he's going to fit right with the Ravens.
When you look at the Ravens and you look at kind of the rest of the teams in the division, what do the Ravens need to take back the division from the Bengals and really then stack up against the rest of the AFC?
Well, that's a good question, honestly. I think that the Ravens, number one, need to get back to forcing turnovers. Turnovers was a big part of their defense the last few years, and last year it just wasn't there. It just wasn't there. And granted, that's a big big reason for that is because Marcus Peters wasn't there, one of their all-pro corners. Marcus Peters, anytime you look at a turnover with the Ravens, he is somehow usually involved in the play. Marlon Humphrey didn't have the year that he's used to having last year, so that was a big part of it. And they've got to get some sort of pass rush. When you look at the AFC North right now, Joe Burrow is there. We saw what ended up being their downfall in the Super Bowl was really the fact that the Rams were able to get unlimited amount of pressure on him from the middle, obviously with Aaron Donald, but also from the outside with guys like Von Miller as well. So the Ravens have got to get back to just being that gritty defense, that physical defense, because last year I thought they got bullied, especially by the Bengals.
And when you look at it, so who are some of the key players kind of on that in that front then? I mean, obviously, Calais Campbell. I mean, that's he's got to play a big role, right?
No question. Calais coming back will be huge for them. I don't know how Calais at this point of his career isn't the pass rusher that he once was. Calais used to be a great run stopper, which he still is, and he also used to kind of match that with his great ability to bring pressure from the inside. He's not able to get the pressure as much as he used to, but that's where guys like Travis Jones, their rookie that they drafted from Connecticut, defensive tackle, comes into play. I think they expect him to be able to be a guy that's their third down interior pass rusher. Justin Madubuike, they've been waiting for him to kind of take the next step as well. I think it needs to be a big year for him. I like his size. I like his athletic ability, but it's just like we've been waiting for him to take that next step to the next level, and he just hasn't been that good to that point yet. But I want to see him take the next step. Odafe Owe, their rookie from last year, he's another one that's coming back off injury right now. But Odafe made some great plays last year, some game-winning plays. He had a couple of game-winning sacks earlier in the season. I think he came in so raw. You know, he's a guy that they were teaching really from the ground up last year. So that gives me some hope for him. He's got great size, great length, great athletic ability. I think the future is bright for him as well. So, you know, and we already touched on David Ajabo, who, you know, is more so just about health and him being able to get back into the swing of things for sure. But Patrick Queen at the linebacker position, this has to be a big year for Patrick Queen. A lot of questions are surrounding him here in Baltimore. He's good, but he's very inconsistent. And when he makes a play, it's a great play. But when he makes a bad play, man, it sticks out big time. So I want to see Patrick Queen take the next step to becoming a linebacker that the Ravens essentially can't take off the field.
Yeah, when you look at a linebacker in Baltimore, I mean, those are some pretty big shoes to fill, but I mean, he needs to step up then.
No question. I mean, middle linebacker is definitely a position of importance here in Baltimore. Like, you know, that we know who's been in that spot before. So, you know, Patrick Queen, he's gifted. You know, he's definitely a good football player. I like him a lot. I like his strengths. His strengths are really when they allow him to come downhill as a blitzer and get in the other team's backfield. Is when he has to kind of wait and react is where he kind of gets himself into trouble. So him taking a step in the direction of the passing game is something that he's going to have to take this defense to the next level.
So overall, when you look at this defense, they're probably better against the pass than they are against the run, right?
Well, I would say the reverse. I think
Okay.
that they're better against the run than the pass. They've got their defensive front. They're loaded, especially up in the middle. We touched on Calais and those guys. The Ravens and being able to stop the run hasn't been an issue for quite some time. The Ravens have been one of the best run-stopping defensive units in the league for the last few years. It's the pass rush that I think will get them in trouble. Now, don't get me wrong. They have potentially the best secondary in the league this year coming into this season. But they don't have the combination of having guys being able to get to the quarterback. That's the issue now. Eric DeCosta said a couple of weeks ago that they're most likely going to bring in a veteran pass rusher before the start of training camp. I would imagine that Justin Houston is the front runner for that, but considering he was here last year and played fairly decent. I thought Justin Houston, although he only had, I think, 2.5 sacks last year, I thought he was their most consistent pass rusher as a whole last year. He wasn't able to finish the play with a sack all the time, but he did get to the backfield. He did put pressure on the quarterback, but pass rushing is going to be a big issue for the Ravens. We touched on Joe Burrow, but Deshaun Watson's in Cleveland now. Obviously, we don't know how much he'll be able to play this year, but at some point, he's going to be on the field. And even out in Pittsburgh, I know Big Ben's gone, but you can never count the Steelers out. They've got Mitch Trubisky out there now, who's got some legs to him. They've got Pickett. They drafted Pickett from Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh. He's not necessarily a statue either. So they're going to be going up against some guys in this division that are a little mobile and can extend plays. So the Ravens, at some point, your secondary can't defend forever. You're going to have somebody be able to put pressure on these quarterbacks.
Absolutely. And so you brought up all the division quarterbacks. How would you rank these division quarterbacks then?
Oh, that's tough. I still want to go Lamar number one because Lamar at his best is one of the best quarterbacks in football. I mean, you just can't stop what Lamar is able to do when he's on his game. We're talking about a guy who is 1,000-yard rusher and at the same time one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league in the passing game. So I would probably go Lamar and then Joe Burrow. Deshaun Watson, the year off, it kind of scares me. It's a new team. Don't know how much he's going to play. That all plays a factor for me. I would go Deshaun Watson third. And we don't even know who the starting quarterback is going to be yet in Pittsburgh. It seems like it'll most likely be Trubisky to start out, or I don't know why I'm drawing a blank
Kenny
on his
Pickett,
name.
yeah.
Pickett, or the other guy that's been there the last few years, Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph. They seem to never want to give up on Mason Rudolph. So who either of the three would rank last in these rankings?
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you look at Lamar Jackson, he just, I mean, so talented. I mean, just, obviously, they talk about him, not being prototypical pocket passer and throwing and everything. But when he throws, it looks so effortless. I mean, it does when it kind of, it reminds me of Michael Vick, how he just like flick it. It would just like, fly. And so he has that. And, you surround him with the right, receivers and everything. And stays healthy. I mean, really, the sky's the limit for this team and Lamar.
No question. And I can tell you, ever since Lamar has come back, he's looked very good throwing the ball. His passes have a lot of zip on them, tight spirals. He's throwing them into some tight windows. He's getting the ball there. I think we're going to see Lamar take a huge step forward as a passer this year because, when you look at Lamar's game, he's not a perfect player by no means. Nobody's perfect out there. But I think when Lamar's really on his A game, it's few deficiencies in his game. There's a few, we can say the inconsistent passes, especially on the outside numbers. Outside the numbers have been there for him. And I think that's something that he's continued to work on for sure. But I think that Lamar and his growth as a passer and learning to work from the pocket and not necessarily think to always, take off down the field. I think that we have seen him make a concerted effort to get better in that department. And I can tell you just from being out there these last few weeks, I think he has definitely taken a step forward in the passing game this year.
And with the season, then so goes Lamar, so goes the Ravens. So, what are your expectations then as you're kind of, there, seeing the team in for this season?
It's so tough, man. It's so
Mhm.
tough because a lot with the Ravens is still injury driven. It's still injury driven, and a lot of their best players haven't returned yet. Marcus Peters hasn't returned. The two backs haven't returned. Ronnie Stanley, their all-pro left tackle, hasn't returned. And David Ajabo and Odafe Owe are their starting outside pass rushers right now. Neither of them are healthy enough to practice just yet, at least in team drill. Odafe Owe has been working on the side, but neither of these guys are there with team drill. So injuries, as just like you said, as far as Lamar goes, will be as far as the Ravens go, but also health-wise will be as far as the Ravens go. But I can tell you, assuming as they're all fully healthy, the AFC they're so tough this year. I mean, the AFC has just got so loaded this year, especially the AFC West. We talked about what the Browns did, bringing in Watson. They brought in Amari Cooper. It's so tough. But I do think that the way that the Ravens are constructed and just how good they are as a team when they're all out there on the field, I think that this is a Ravens team that can definitely be a top 3 seed in the AFC. I think this is a team that can, when healthy, take back the reins in the AFC North. And I think that that's something that they're looking forward to. They're looking forward to those matchups against the Bengals, who took it to them last year, both times, ran it up on them, and talked their talk after the game. So the Ravens haven't forgotten that. And I think that they're really licking their chops to get back to the Bengals. I see the Ravens being a division winner this year. Come playoff time, that's when we'll see. Can they beat a team like Buffalo? Can they beat a team like the Chiefs, who are still there? We don't know what the Dolphins are going to look like. The Raiders, all these teams have just had massive overhauls. Even the Broncos added in Russell Wilson. But I do think that the Ravens are a playoff team. And, if Lamar can stay hot into the playoffs, this is a team that can go as far as they want to.
Yeah, and you look at the team, and if they're not successful, I mean, do you still kind of trust in Harbaugh? And how much kind of leash does he get as a coach? I mean, he's been there for a long time. I mean, eventually, I don't know if the Ravens would need a new voice, or do you still trust Harbaugh?
Yeah, I do trust John Harbaugh. I think honestly, last year when you look at it, I think John Harbaugh was in the running for Coach of the Year, considering that the Ravens went into December, I believe, as the number one seed in the AFC, and that's with all the injuries that they had. Now, obviously, the wheels fell off the bus because it just became too much to handle down the stretch for sure with all the tough opponents they played in the month of December, but. I do like John Harbaugh as a coach. I think he's a great coach. They did, and obviously the Ravens feel that way as well. He did get an extension this offseason, so he'll be there for quite some time. And I think when you're talking about Lamar and his contract status, John Harbaugh is a big piece of that. John Harbaugh and Lamar, they have a very great relationship. They have a great relationship, and I would imagine that if Lamar wants to, if the Ravens want Lamar to be with them long term, he's their guy. Lamar's guy is going to have to be on the sideline, and his guy has been John Harbaugh.
Absolutely, and so you look at this team, and they're really set up to have success. What is the pulse of the Baltimore fans? I mean, you have the Super Bowls. I mean, is there sense of this success needs to happen, or and maybe even last year, what was that like? Just that roller coaster with the injuries with the fans.
Yeah, last year was tough for the fans. I can tell you that this is a fan base that's used to winning. They're used to winning. They know that we all know about the type of culture that the Ravens have out here in Baltimore. This is just a team that's used to going out there and getting the job done. So it was tough for the fans to watch the Ravens last year because you know a lot of the top guys weren't out there due to injury, but also I think the fans were somewhat, at least should be, somewhat proud of what they saw. The Ravens, it came all the way down to the last game for them fighting to get into the playoffs, and that's with no Lamar Jackson for pretty much the last month of the season. Without your two All-Pro corners, without your All-Pro left tackle, without your the Ravens lost their top three running backs last year. They had guys off the street in the backfield last year and still in contention. So that speaks to the Ravens culture. And I think that the fans really, they have high expectations. They have high expectations, and rightfully so. It's what they've been shown since the Ravens have been here. But I think that the fans this year, they're expecting a bounce back year. Lamar is here. They got Hollywood trade happen. You got the somewhat quote unquote bad energy out of the locker room right now. I think that everybody is just all hands on deck. And I think that the Ravens fans are sitting back and looking to take back control of the AFC North.
And when you look at it from a fantasy football perspective, how high should we be kind of looking at Bateman? Because he could potentially, I mean, be one of the players that might be overdrafted because people are everyone's talking about it now. Should we really kind of focus on him in our drafts?
That's a good question, honestly. And you said it. He's a guy that he's a danger guy, right? Because he can be a guy that you could potentially overdraft because he's the number one receiver here. But we know that the Ravens are a running team. And even when they do throw the ball, Mark Andrews is the guy you want in the passing game. He's the number one guy. If you can get somebody, Mark Andrews is the guy. Now, Rashod Bateman, he's more of a value guy, I would say. If you can get him in the mid to late rounds, because I don't think that he's going to go with the elite receivers. Once we start seeing the elite receivers come off the board, he's not going to be a part of that group. But as we all know, when we play fantasy, you have some fanboys in your league, and it depends. If you're in the league with a guy who's a big time Ravens fan who's keeping tabs on what's going on out here in Baltimore, he's going to be looking at a Rashod Bateman, and he could snag him early. But that could be, that's a high risk, high reward type situation. I think Bateman's in store for a big year, but that could be a big year for Baltimore wide receiver standards, which aren't necessarily high.
Yeah, and you talk about Mark Andrews being a focal point of the offense, and when you look at him amongst the other NFL tight ends, how would you rank him?
I mean, I don't think you can go wrong ranking him the number one tight end in football. He's
Mm.
coming off being the All-Pro this year, which would state that he was the best tight end in the league this past year. He set a Ravens franchise record. But you could also, I wouldn't argue with you if you said he was the second best tight end in the league behind Travis Kelce. You know, those guys are interchangeable. They're both great at what they do. They're the cream of the crop at the tight end position. Not that there aren't other tight ends. Darren Waller. We know how great Rob Gronkowski has been throughout his career. But right now, I just think that what Mark Andrews does for this team, and we'll see how Travis Kelce's load increase a little bit this year too. I think with Tyreek Hill going to Miami, but just what Mark Andrews is for this Ravens offense and specifically this passing offense. I think Mark Andrews is potentially the best tight end in football right now.
Yeah, and what makes him so good? I mean, he's just. I mean, obviously, everyone knows he's the focal point of the offense, but he's able to get open. He's able to get touchdowns. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what about him is so good?
He's so versatile. You can line him up anywhere. You can line him up at your traditional tight end spot, but he can also be lined up as a receiver because corners are at this point corners are guarding him anyway. And he's a big body guy. He's an aggressive guy. He attacks the ball. He'll go get it at his high point. He's taking some tough hits, catching some of these passes. He's bounced off of some hits, to get some yak. There is nothing about Mark Andrews that he can't do. He gives you everything you want as a receiver and as a tight end. I just think his versatility is unmatched. He has great hands, and he's just a tough guy, man. And he's coming into camp a little bit more, a little slimmer. His body has kind of revamped itself, so to speak. He almost looks like a wide receiver, but he's still a big guy. He's still a big guy. He's still a great receiver. And even with Lamar missing OTAs, I can tell you once Lamar showed up to minicamp, that Lamar and Mark Andrews connection didn't go away at all.
Yeah, and so you look at things in training camp, obviously with the Lamar Jackson stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other storylines that maybe we haven't touched on yet that you're watching?
Well, definitely the pass rush situation in
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore. That's a big focal point. We don't know if who's going to be added to their pass rushing group to this point, or once by the time we get to the regular season. But they've got a massive need at the pass rushing spot right now. Also, the health of Ronnie Stanley. We don't know how healthy Ronnie Stanley is going to be. We saw last year the Ravens had Alejandro Villanueva at left tackle, and that was just terrible. That's just not a spot for him at this point in his career. It was just bad. The Ravens' offensive line as a whole last year, for the most part, was pretty bad. So them being able to bounce back this year, a lot of that hinges on the health of Ronnie Stanley, because that decides where some of these other guys decide to play. The Ravens have a lot of utility guys along their offensive line, but Ronnie Stanley being there or not being there dictates where some of these guys play. Also, I would say, on the defensive side of the ball as well, their secondary, while as good as they are, just how are they going to play these guys personnel-wise? Like I said before, I expect to see a lot of 6 and maybe even 7 DBs on the field at a time this year for the Ravens. So I'm interested to see how they use their different personnel packages, who wears the green dot for them. Chuck Clark has been the guy wearing the green dot for the Ravens the last few years, but with the draft pick of Kyle Hamilton and bringing in Marcus Williams, their free agent acquisition at safety, Chuck Clark's playtime is going to go down a little bit. And you typically like whoever's wearing a green dot to be a guy who's going to be on the field all game, is a guy that's not going to be taken out. So that'll be something to watch. And lastly, I would say the running back position. I talked about Tyler Beatty. I'm a huge fan of his. Ever since the Ravens have drafted him, he's looked like the best running back out there. And considering that's with J.K. Dobbins and Ous Edwards not being able to practice not right now, but with what they have today, I think Tyler Beatty is their best running back available right now. So I'll be interested to see what this running back rotation looks like this year, because as we know, the Ravens are a heavy running team, and they're going to need their running backs to be a big part of that.
Yeah, and you talked about the secondary. I mean, are they they're going to have to do multiple things to try? I mean, no one can really cover Jamar Chase, but I mean that has to be one of their focuses, right?
Oh yeah, I mean Jamar Chase will be the guy. You know, he's a big focal point for them this year. He gave them major issues last year in both of the games. But I think the good thing for the Ravens is they have that film, right? And at the same time, they played those games outside of the first one because Marlon Humphrey was there for the first one. Can't really recall off the top of my head if he was there for the second one. I know he was there for the first one, but Marcus Peters wasn't. And they're able to do so many different things when they have both of those guys. And they brought in two extra DBs as well in Demarion Williams, who's another versatile guy. He goes by Pepe Williams. You know, that's the nickname he likes to go by. So Pepe Williams, I like him. And also Jalen Armour Davis from Alabama, cornerback from Alabama. These are two new guys that they brought into the fold, as well as Kyle Fuller, a veteran. So the Ravens have a lot of pieces that they can play with in their secondary right now that they weren't afforded last year in some of their tough division matchups.
Well, this has been fantastic. I definitely appreciate you coming on. And where
For
can
sure.
everyone? Yeah, where can everyone find you again?
Yeah, definitely, man. Catch me on Twitter at Cordell Woodland. Same on Instagram. You can catch my show on 105.7 The Fan here in Baltimore, Shakin It Up Sports. It's every Sunday from 4 to 7. I'm also the beat reporter for the Ravens and beat reporter for the Orioles for that same station as well. So you can catch me all over the place here in Baltimore. If you download the Odyssey app, you can catch us at any time.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and we'll definitely have to connect again as the season starts. I'm excited to see kind of how everything kind of will shake out. Obviously, with Lamar's situation, but just even offensively. I mean, it's nice to see all of these young quarterbacks. I feel like in the NFL we have a ton of great young quarterbacks, and
Mm-hmm.
and that leads to just some great football.
No question, no question. The future of football is in great hands. I'm not worried about it at all. It's been nothing but great quarterback after great quarterback coming in. And right now, where the league stands, I mean, we've got a nice mix of old and new. You know, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, those guys, they're still playing at the top of their game. And you still got the young bucks here. You know, Patrick Mahomes hasn't gone anywhere. Joe Burrow's coming off a Super Bowl run. And you got Lamar Jackson, who's, on revenge mode right now. Oh, and let's not forget about Josh Allen as well. So
Mhm.
the NFL is in great hands, man. It's incredibly fun to watch. And it's a great and a blessing to be able to cover the Ravens the way that I do.
Awesome. Thanks again, Cordell. Once again, this has been NFL Outdated Cover 2 series on the Baltimore Ravens, and we'll connect with you again soon. Thanks again.
Yes, sir. No problem. Thanks for having me.